बिस्मिल्लाहिर्रहमानिर्रहीम। मोअज़्ज़िज़ सामीन कराम, अस्सलाम वालेकुम रहमतुल्लाह। आज हमारे दरमियान दुनिया सियासत की एक इंतहाई अहम शख्सियत और अपने खित्ते की वाहिद ऐसी आवाज़ मौजूद हैं जिनकी ज़िंदगी का मकसद सिर्फ़ और सिर्फ आवाज़ हक़ की सरबुलंदी और उम्मत मुस्लिमा की पुरखुलूस हिमायत है। किसी भी तारुफ के मोहताज नहीं हैं। आज हमारे साथ मौजूद हैं जनाब मोहतरम जॉर्ज गैलवे साहब। गुड मॉर्निंग सर।
Good morning to you. Assalamu alaikum. Thanks very much for coming.
Thank you very much for giving us some time. Let's start with Pakistan, sir.
Yes.
What do you think? What is the biggest threat to Pakistan? Religious terrorists, political parties, or sold-out media?
All of the above. I have been close to Pakistan for almost all of my life. I became involved first in Pakistan's affairs in the middle 1970s, middle to late of 1970s, and I remain in close touch with events in Pakistan until now. I have had the benefit of the last 3 years representing tens of thousands of Pakistanis in Parliament in the city of Bradford. Many of them, most of them, Kashmiris from Azad Kashmir, but also from elsewhere in the state. And in all of the time that I have been involved in Pakistan, there has been religious terrorism throughout the 1980s, deliberately fostered by the West, Britain and America included, principally the United States, in the long war in Afghanistan, which had its blowback in Pakistan, part of which we're still suffering from now. It has had political parties squabbling amongst each other, criminalizing each other, spending most of their energy in each of their terms, prosecuting and persecuting the people that came before. And it's always had a very dodgy media. The quality of the dodginess has varied from time to time. The source of the dodginess has changed from time to time, but it's always had dodgy media. Well, Pakistan has many threats. Extremism is incipient, whether it's secular extremism in Karachi, emanating from the so-called MQM, or Islamist extremism spilling over from Afghanistan in the form of the so-called Pakistan Taliban, or the again incipient threat of separatism. That separatism challenge is largely at the moment a Baluch challenge, but there is always the possibility in what was known as the Northwest Frontier of separatism in that direction also. As you know, the Durand Line was a rather arbitrary one and is always questionable by some people. So Pakistan faces these three existential threats, but they also have enduring threats. The failure of the political class to move the country forward, to govern cleanly, and to avoid the peril which they share with Bangladesh of spending most of their energy criminalizing and prosecuting the people who came before, a kind of Tweedledee and Tweedledum approach to politics, a zero-sum game approach to politics, excuse me, all of which are deeply damaging to the state. But Pakistan has also, I think, structural problems emanating from the presence in the state of an overweening, far too big and expensive military and security apparatus, which has far too much to do with other things than military and security. I'm in favor of military. I'm in favor of security, but the Pakistan military and security appear unable to guarantee any security, but definitely guarantee their own continuing very lucrative role in the state. So as someone who has been involved with Pakistan for almost all of my life, since I was in my 20s, and now representing tens of thousands of people of Pakistani origin in the city of Bradford here in Parliament, I worry daily about the situation in Pakistan.
So we see the entire Middle East is being balkanized through 5-generation warfare. Do you think that Pakistan is also under attack with the 5-generation warfare, where we have threats from the both sides, Afghanistan and India?
Well, Pakistan is always inherently in danger of breaking up. All of my life, the question has been, will Pakistan survive as one country? In the 1970s, half of the country broke away, and the remaining parts of Pakistan all have incipient separatist movements and ideas in the country. But at the moment, the greater threat to Pakistan is Islamist fanaticism. I'm not sure who's behind it or what its real purpose is, but definitely it's a clear and present danger. Of course, secular terrorism in Karachi claims many lives also, but the attacks on religious minorities by fanatics and the existence of no-go areas outside the apparent grip of the central state apparatus is always a reason to be concerned that these brush fires will become widespread and general. Well, I do think that Pakistan has had a very bad choice of friends, in particular the United States, which Pakistan persists in regarding as a friend, though it's thousands of miles away and has done nothing other than destabilize Pakistan from time to time. While China, for example, which has been a genuine friend to Pakistan and is its neighbor, has far less influence in what happens in Pakistan than the United States does. I mention that because one of the problems that Pakistan suffers, at this moment not critically, is separatism, the breakup of the state, the balkanization that you referred to as undoubtedly underway in the Middle East. These separatist tendencies have been and will be picked up, put down by the United States and others according to need. If they want to break up Pakistan, they have the capability to do so because separatist tendencies do exist, and if pour enough resource, as was shown in Yugoslavia, for example, in Kosovo, if you pour enough military and financial resource into a separatist cause, you can generally succeed. Or on the other side, is now happening in eastern Ukraine. If you back separatism from the outside, you can generally succeed, but the end result is very rarely a good one. It hasn't been in Yugoslavia, and won't be in Ukraine. Definitely would not be in Pakistan. But at the moment, I think the weapon of choice being used in Pakistan is this hall of mirrors around the issue of Islamist extremism. Who these people really are, who they're really working for, is not yet clear. But that they are creating total havoc everywhere is very clear.
So do you think India is directly involved in promoting terrorism and chaos in the country? As you know, the radical Zionist party, RSS, is in power now. Do you think they will behave in future?
Well, India has always, despite who governed it, been involved in terrorism in Pakistan and in a wish to keep Pakistan divided, weak, unstable, up to a point. It's definitely not in India's interest, even for Mr. Modi, for Pakistan to collapse into a vortex of rampant fanaticism, because the existence of nuclear weapons in Pakistan makes that a very dangerous proposition indeed. But they like to keep Pakistan on the edge of that particular cliff. If Pakistan's on the edge of that cliff, then India goes from strength to strength, and Pakistan does not. The continued lack of international will to settle the Kashmir issue, which, as you know, was internationalized when the United Nations declared the right of the people of Jammu and Kashmir to a plebiscite to determine their own future, a promise by the international community which has never been fulfilled, and until it is fulfilled, there will be a state of war in Jammu and Kashmir. India believes that if it keeps Pakistan weak, provided that this will weaken the freedom struggle in Kashmir. Now that India is ruled by a right-wing Hindu fanatic government with ever closer relations with Israel, and the Indian security agencies are working more and more closely with the Israeli security and intelligence agencies, we can expect nothing but more problems and more trouble emanating from such sources.
Can we expect higher level of aggression on line of control from India, like an attack?
It's not impossible. Modi is quite a dangerous man. And early signs are that he is not behaving. There was some speculation that just as it took, President Nixon, a right-wing Republican, to go to China and make a new China policy, that perhaps Mr. Modi, with his right-wing secure, would actually surprise us all with a more enlightened policy towards Pakistan. Early signs are not good on that. Of course, Prime Minister Modi has to listen to the United States, which is a very close ally now of India. But he seems to me to be inherently an extremist, like Netanyahu, neither of whom will necessarily listen to the United States, at least decisively on such matters. So it is a possibility, of course.
Do you think if we will not react now, we will soon become like Syria, Libya, or...
There's a danger. I never imagined that Syria would become like this.
Yeah.
I could imagine that Iraq would become like this because of the sectarian and ethnic division within Iraq, the presence of Kurdistan within the state, the presence of a Shia Arab majority amongst the Arabs in the state, always made Iraq potentially unstable. It was only stable because of the particular characteristics of the Ba'ath Party dictatorship, later led by Saddam Hussein. But Syria, much more homogenic, I never believed would end up in the state that it's in. Pakistan, like Iraq, has much of the same potential for disintegration. So no Pakistani should be complacent about the actual danger of Pakistan too falling victim to the kind of flames that are now enveloping much of the Arab Middle East.
What is Pakistan's woes in the presence of most debauched political, feudal and treacherous elite?
Well, the Pakistani political class has failed. This is incontestable. Some have failed worse than others. All have failed for the same set of reasons. And what Pakistan needs is a new political order. I have no doubt about that. Needs a new order with a new approach, and needs radical, revolutionary change if it's going to move forward. I'm a great admirer of the Shaheed Zulfikar Ali Bhutto. I believe if Mr. Bhutto had succeeded in his revolution, and Pakistan had developed in the way that its neighbor, China, has developed, everything would have been better for the people of Pakistan and for the world. He failed because of the military coup and his assassination. And it's too late to go back to that. But some kind of new force needs to emerge in Pakistan if Pakistan is going to be different when I die than it was when I was in my 20s.
So should Pakistan try a new social experiment in engineering through a technocratic caretaker government backed by and supported by army to clean the system ruthlessly?
Well, the history of such so-called technocratic governments is not a good one, neither in Pakistan nor in Bangladesh, nor in some other countries, because what is a technocrat? He's a man who is not in one of the two major parties in the state. But that doesn't mean he doesn't have politics or interests. Doesn't mean he doesn't represent interests. So, Mr. Churchill famously said that democracy was the worst form of government, apart from all the others. And although inherently an absurd statement, it actually does encapsulate the truth. There are many forms of democracy, however. It's not necessary, never was, for Pakistan to replicate the Westminster system. There's nothing great about the Westminster system. It's certainly not transferable to Pakistan or to other former parts of the empire. Democracy is about accountable government and government for the people. There's no point in having a system that is nominally elected by the people if it doesn't act in the interests of the people. And when I see some of this replication, not just in Pakistan, but in Africa also, I've seen it, where a kind of replica of the House of Commons is created, and a replica constitution, though we don't actually have a constitution, is enacted. I always fear for the future in that kind of democracy. Pakistan needs a revolution, and I don't know where that revolution is going to come from or what form it's going to take. It's not my business in either case. But if we continue to have more of the same in Pakistan, then we'll have the same result. Professor Einstein once said that the definition of madness was to do the same thing over and over again and expect a different result.
So how can the Muslim world make the developed countries like Russia, USA, UK, Germany, and European countries to take some practical measures to end the political crisis in Middle East?
I don't think that Pakistan can do that. Pakistan should concentrate on its own problems, which are many and growing. But Pakistan is a very significant part of the Muslim Ummah of 2 billion people who need to act in a concerted way and have not. Pakistan, of course, all Pakistanis love Palestine. They hate Zionism, and the state stamps on its very passports that no one may enter Israel with this passport and so on. And that's important. And Pakistan, as an extremely populous Muslim country, has its role to play. But when I see Jerusalem crumbling in front of our eyes, when I see Gaza being massacred in front of our eyes, and the 2 billion strong Ummah unable to lift a finger effectively to help it, then I don't know if God can cry. I certainly do, and millions around the world do. And we ask God and we ask the Muslims to get their act together and act in a concerted way. They're not. And Pakistani people, armed forces, are present in Saudi Arabia. I know you'll have to cut this out, but I have to say it.
No, sir.
Saudi Arabia could, together with its friends in the Gulf, could resolve this Palestine question almost overnight by using the weapon that the late, great King Faisal did, of simply saying, we will not do business as usual with people who are endangering the Masjid Al-Aqsa, from which the Prophet himself ascended to the heavens and came back with the revelation. How can you expect us to do business as usual with people who are literally seeking openly to destroy Al-Aqsa, to flood the Holy Land in blood? If the Muslims did that in a united way, the United States would have to cry, stop. But they don't. They rather preoccupy themselves with their own internal interests and squabbles. They withdrew all their ambassadors recently from Qatar. And they were very tough, diplomatically, politically, on Qatar. But when Gaza was drowning, they didn't even meet. And they can't meet, because if they meet, they'll have to do something. And they don't want to do anything. And this is the sickness at the heart of the Muslim Ummah.
So what do you suggest? What should Muslim Ummah should take the steps to end the ever-increasing sectarianism?
This is a very grave danger. It is the clear policy of those who hate all Muslims. Now let me rephrase that. They don't necessarily hate Muslims. They fear the Muslims. Those who fear the Muslims getting their act together have tried several wheezes to stop that. The latest wheeze is sectarianism. To persuade Muslims that the man who prays like this as opposed to praying like this is a greater danger to the Muslims than the man who doesn't pray at all and who is stealing the wealth of all the Muslims and holding captive the entire Palestinian people and threatening Al-Aqsa. They are less dangerous to the Muslims than a sect of Muslims who follow the same Quran, who follow all the same theological principles, but who have some elaboration with which the majority of Muslims disagree. That's more dangerous. And actually we ought to all slaughter each other for the edification of the others. This is a deliberate policy. There are rulers in the Muslim world who have an interest in this poison coursing ever more powerfully through the body of the Ummah, because they think it will guarantee their own hold on power for a little bit longer. But of course, they're playing with fire, or they have a tiger by the tail. And this tiger of sectarianism, fanaticism that it induces, will devour all of them. You see the statement from this so-called Caliph, Baghdadi, just a few days ago. He called for revolution in Saudi Arabia itself. He called for the Muslims to unsheath their sword in Saudi Arabia. And this will happen. These wolves of sectarianism, becoming more and more obscenely extreme. In this latest video from ISIS, it's pretty hard to beat. You know, Quentin Tarantino could not have devised a more blood-soaked scene than this. These wolves will one day roam the corridors of the palace of the Saudi monarchs. They have made for themselves a monster which will devour them. And unfortunately, will devour the future of hundreds of millions of Muslims in the world. It's a very dire, dark and bleak outlook, I know. But it's one that I'm increasingly contemplating, I'm sorry.
So how do you see the future of conflict of Kashmir and Palestine?
Well, my main task is, at least in the days remaining to me, to have as many people in the world know about the situation in Kashmir as know about the situation in Palestine. It is the insult that is added to the very considerable injury suffered by the people of Kashmir that nobody talks about.
Yes.
The world endlessly fixates on Palestine. The BBC News this morning was broken. Breaking news. 4 people killed in Jerusalem. 4 Israeli worshippers in a synagogue killed in Jerusalem. 4 in a morning is not at all unusual in Kashmir. But not only would they not break into the news with the news, they wouldn't even report the news. Nothing comes out of Kashmir. There's no oil, but there's many tears. Tears are never noticed quite as much as oil.
How do you see and what is your opinion about the Pakistan as a member state of Muslim Ummah and the people of Pakistan? Are they ready to lead the Muslim Ummah?
Potentially.
Potentially, yes.
Pakistan and Indonesia as the 2 biggest components of this Ummah have to step forward. We can't have 2 billion people effectively steered by the oligarchs of tiny countries that are no more than petrol stations. This is absurd. The Muslim Ummah has to be driven by the people of the Ummah, and the people in the Ummah are in overwhelming number Indonesian and Pakistani. There are other big Muslim populations. These are the 2 most significant. They have to find a political weight commensurate with the weight of their population. I hope the new president of Indonesia, Jokowi, who is very different from what went before, will start to move Indonesia to the front of the Ummah. And I hope that Pakistan will have a leadership that will do the same.
In the last, what inspired you to be on the right side? What inspired you? How did you become the fan of the Muslim Ummah? Why you started supporting the Muslims?
Well, God works in mysterious ways. When I was a very young man, 21, a Palestinian student leader came to the office of the Labour Party in my city of Dundee, in which I was alone, and he asked to see the leaders of the party. I said, there are no leaders here, but if you talk to me, I'll talk to them. And after 2 hours, mesmerizing story of what had happened, catastrophe, the Nakba, to the Palestinian people, I was a signed-up member of the Palestinian resistance. From this came a wider involvement in the Arab world, and thereby a wider involvement in the Muslim world. And it has been my good fortune, sometimes ill fortune, but mainly good fortune, to therefore, from the age of 21 until now, spend my life deeply absorbed in this Muslim Ummah. Islam is perfect. The Muslims are not. And only when these two things begin to converge will justice prevail in the world. I won't see it, but by the grace of God, I have many sons. Inshallah, I hope they will see it.
थैंक यू वेरी मच। मौजूद नाजरीन, जैसा कि आपने सुना जॉर्ज गैलवे साहब को, उन्होंने बताया कि पाकिस्तान को अभी भी खतरात लाहक हैं और अभी भी वक्त है हमारे पास कि हम आंखें खोल लें और बेहतर मुस्तकबिल के लिए अभी से अपनी कोशिशें जारी कीजिए। पार्लिमान बरतानिया से तलहा रजा को इजाजत दीजिए। अस्सलाम वालेकुम। थैंक यू वेरी मच सर।